everybody, welcome back to another episode of Dialing In, and again carrying on with the Firmware 3.1 series in the Dialing In series. I'm going to take a look at the wonderful new Euclidean Delay. Now this is a request I've had a whole bunch to dive into this. I messed around with it briefly. I read about kind of the background behind this in general terms, and I'm not going to go too in depth. I haven't really had time myself to dig into the deeper paper about where these rhythms come from, but this is a delay that's going to allow us to generate musical patterns based around something called Euclidean rhythms, or based around Euclid's algorithm from what I understand. So it sounds confusing, it sounds complicated. There's a really good write-up that the folks from Line 6 put in the release notes, along with a couple great links to more information. So if you really want to dive really deeply into the hows and whys of how it's creating these musical patterns, you can do so. But I think most people just want to have a general understanding and get to work making some cool music. And I'll tell you one thing, this delay will allow you to do just that. So let's dive over to HX Edit. So first things first, I have a little preset set up as I was messing around with this. Top path, I just have a Matchstick Channel 1 tone going here, and I'll just turn everything else off. You'll see I have a few other blocks here, and all it is basically this. All right, so that's the tone we have. Now, let's go right over to one of these instances of the Euclidean delay. Now, I have this set up for something kind of cool I'm going to show you at the end, but I'm going to center that back off. I'm going to turn this back on. Let's go over each parameter. So we have note sync or step time. Now, if you notice, it's called step time when it's in milliseconds, and it's called note sync when it's in musical note values. We're going to use the musical note values for this video, but let's keep it on step time for a second. So we have step time, we have feedback, like most delays. We have steps, fill, rotate, mix, low cut, high cut, level, and trails. Okay, so I'm going to keep our trails on both of these. Now, the trails is obvious. When we, switch from snapshot to snapshot, whatever delay trails are still going on are not going to get cut off. That's similar to a lot of the other delays we have. The level control, simply the output level of that block. High cut and low cut, same sort of an idea. We can, if we want maybe slightly lower phi tone, where a little darkened on just the repeats, it's not going to affect the original tone, just the delayed repeats that the delay is creating. We can lower this down. I'll give you an example of that, but nothing earth shattering there. Same with the low cut. Mix is just going to be, again, like always, the mix between the direct signal and whatever the delays are. At a 50-50 setting, it's about equal volume between direct and the delays. Now, let's go to feedback. Feedback is very similar. Again, this is going to be how many times we want the delayed pattern that's created from the Euclidean delay to basically keep repeating itself. So, but step time, okay. Let's go into turning this into note sync though, because I think this is going to be an easier way to kind of do the math here. So what's happening with the Euclidean delay is we're basically creating a timeline that's going to have a certain number of steps, user-defined steps. A step is just going to be a little, think of it as a little block or circle along a timeline which can be filled in or not filled in, meaning it can make sound or not make sound. So the step time is going to tell us the amount of time between each step on this timeline. But you might ask, well, how many steps do we have on that timeline? Well, that's by going down to the steps control. So I could go down and have anywhere from 1 to 16 steps on this timeline. So if we change this over to something like note sync and say, okay, we have an 8th note. So that's going to tell us along this timeline, the delay is going to place all these little blocks 1/8 note apart. Pretty simple, but how many of them are going to be? Well, we're going to set that ourselves. So if I wanted 8 steps along this timeline, all 1/8 note apart, how do we figure out how long our total sequence is? Well, we multiply the steps by the step time. So in this case, we have an 8th note times 8. So it's 8 8th notes. That would be 4 beats in total. So in this particular situation, we're going to have equivalent to a whole note, or in 4/4 time, a whole measure. And it's going to have these 8th notes distributed equally along it. Now, how is it going to sound? Well, we're not going to know that until we decide how many of these little 8 blocks we've put on that we want filled in. We do that by using the fill control. So we say if I want only one fill, what the Euclidean delay is going to do based off of this Euclidean algorithm or Euclid algorithm, it's going to distribute the number of fills that we want as evenly as possible along that timeline of 8 blocks. So for instance, if I did this, and I'm just going to bring the feedback down to 0 and our mix up to about 50% here. Kind of makes sense. It kind of slaps it right down in the middle if we're counting at the 120 beats per minute I have here. Well, if I change that to 2, it's now going to fill in 2 of those spaces as equally distributed as it can. We change it to 4. And so on and so forth. What if we take it up to 8? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. It fills in all of those steps along that timeline. So kind of interesting stuff. So if we play around with this and go to, say, 16th note, these are all a little more predictable. That kind of has a machine gun type effect. Where it gets interesting, if I come back to the 8th note and maybe do kind of an odd number here, maybe grab 5, or even, let's go 7. So it creates some pretty interesting rhythms. Now you'll notice I have rotate here accidentally on 1. If I bring this back to 0, we'll hear a different idea here. Okay, so what the rotate control does is it takes whatever pattern we have and it's going to move, for every one we move the rotate up, it's going to take that pattern and shift it 1 step forward. So while that's the same rhythmic pattern, it's just shifted forward into relation to the first note we had. So if we really like the pattern we've created with the other parameters, that's going to allow us to just shift it around to place it where we want rhythmically, which is really interesting stuff. So we can play around with that in many different ways. Change it with the fill. Again, if we bring that rotate back. So no end of really interesting ideas here. Now, like I was saying before with the high cut, if I bring that way down, you'll hear how those repeats are just darkened way up. Give it a little more of a lo-fi sound to it. So we'll keep that up for now. So lots of control over our sound. We can also bring that mix control down and have them less obvious. Or we could bring that mix control all the way up and have only those Euclidean rhythms that are being created. You can do something like that. So I hope that kind of explains what's happening. I mean, you're probably not going to necessarily be able to predict exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be a lot of trial and error, but understanding that we have this timeline with these steps along the way, that we're telling the Euclidean delay how to fill them in, and then we can use the rotate control to move them, that rhythm, into different places to create our own rhythms. We do have a lot of control, and I think with a little experimentation, once we have the understanding of how long we're creating this timeline is, which is the step time versus the steps, right? How many steps we have, how much time we want between steps, and then the algorithm takes over and does the rest. But where it gets really interesting now is if we combine two of these. You'll notice what I did, and this is an idea that was from the Line 6 release notes. I pulled a second one down on a parallel path, and I'm just feeding the signal to them equally. And what I did is I panned path 1 all the way to the left, panned path B all the way to the right, so that we have two of these on now. And I'm going to set them to different settings. The second one, I have the note sync of a quarter note, feedback at 50%. I'm going to bring the feedback back up on this to 50%. And I'm going to have 8 steps. I'm going to have fill of 3, rotate of 0, mix of 42% here. And the low and high cuts are just going to stay at their kind of default settings. Now with this one here, I'm going to, again, bring this back to 42%. I'm going to rotate that 1, I believe. I'm going to change this to a quarter note with 8 steps and a fill of 5 with the rotate at 1. Now, let's see what we get out of this. We get 2 separate patterns overlaying over each other. I've panned them hard left and right, mind you. I mean, if I didn't pan them hard left and right and kept them up the center, it might not sound as clear. But we could also play around with these, change one of them to, say, 16th notes. So now what you end up with is two rhythms kind of playing off each other and creating some pretty interesting polyrhythms, one rhythm on top of another. Now, another idea we could use is something like this, where we bring in a poly pitch. And in this case, I threw it up 1 octave higher for the top delay. So it's only going to affect the top delay. I've routed the other delay around it so it doesn't get affected by the poly pitch. And now we can play with pitch with one side of these rhythms. So again, interesting stuff. I could bring it down an octave. Whoops. Or I could pull this down to only affect the other delay line. So tons of possibilities. Sorry for the endless noodling there, but we could also process them in different ways, right? We could add modulation after them when we separate the paths out. We can do whatever we want with them, and very, very interesting stuff. So I hope that kind of helps some folks to understand at least what's going on. Like I said, unless we dive in and really understand how this algorithm, distributes these filled notes along the line depending on the settings, we're probably going to have a little bit of unpredictability. We also have that rotate control, which can throw another wrench into it. But I think if we have a basic understanding of our step time times our steps is going to give us the whole length of the timeline we're dealing with. The number of steps along that line are going to be the full number that can possibly be filled in. The step time is the distance between them. And then we can use that with the fill control to decide how busy a pattern we want, how sparse a pattern we want. We can use rotate to kind of customize it as we go along. And then by using two of them for these really cool polyrhythms, man, there's a lot of really great compositional tools here that I think could really help a lot of folks to come up with some really cool creative ideas and come up with some great sounds. I plan on using this a lot. I have a lot of fun with these things. And with the understanding, a little bit of knowledge behind how it works, and then a little bit of creativity, I think we can come up with some really, really great ideas. So I hope that was clear. It's a little bit of a strange thing to talk about. Check out the release notes and the links that the Line 6 folks provide in the release notes to really read up on this more. But I hope that at least piques your interest for anybody who is maybe afraid to dive into this. When it seemed a little bit scary to dive into, hopefully that'll get you to jump in there and mess around with it. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Please like the video, share with anybody who you think would get use out of watching it, and subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much, and I'll be back soon. Ciao for now.